Sometimes the most important turn in your life begins with someone who never asks your name. The July sun shimmered above a quiet stretch of Tulane Highway just outside Franklin, Tennessee, where heat waves danced above the asphalt, and every passing mile seemed to promise a destination worth chasing. Naomi Brooks tightened her grip on the steering wheel of her midnight blue 1967 Mustang as the engine suddenly coughed, sputtered, and lost its rhythm. The dashboard flickered once before the car rolled silently onto the gravel shoulder beneath the shade of an aging oak tree. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting out the kind of weary sigh that had nothing to do with the broken car and everything to do with the life waiting beyond it. In less than 40 minutes, she was supposed to meet a man chosen by friends who insisted she needed a fresh start. A blind date she had already convinced herself would end exactly like all the others, with polite smiles, empty conversation, and another reminder that people admired her success far more than they ever cared to know the woman behind it. She stepped out into the summer heat, lifted the hood, and stared at the engine without really seeing it. Designer heels sank slightly into the loose gravel while distant cicadas filled the heavy afternoon air. Several vehicles rushed past without slowing. A pickup hauling lumber, a delivery van, 2 SUVs. Nobody stopped. Then an aging silver Ford F-150 eased onto the shoulder behind her Mustang. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in faded jeans, worn work boots, and a grease-stained gray t-shirt climbed out with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years solving problems one bolt at a time. Ethan Walker offered a small, respectful smile instead of questions. "Looks like she's giving you a hard time." Naomi returned a cautious smile. "You could say that." He glanced toward the engine but kept a comfortable distance. "Mind if I take a look?" There was no sales pitch, no exaggerated confidence, no attempt to impress her. Just quiet kindness. Naomi nodded. Ethan rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms marked only by years of honest work rather than flashy success. Within seconds, he noticed a loose fuel line connection hidden beneath the air cleaner housing. His hands moved carefully, deliberately, never rushing, never showing off. Naomi watched in silence. Something about the way he worked felt almost old-fashioned, as though patience itself had become a forgotten skill. "You know classic Mustangs pretty well," she said. Ethan smiled without looking up. "My late wife loved them. She always said old cars tell the truth. If you listen long enough, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong." Naomi lowered her eyes. There was sadness in his voice, but no bitterness. Just gratitude wrapped inside memory. A few minutes later, Ethan turned the ignition key. The V8 engine rumbled back to life with a deep, confident growl. Naomi's shoulders relaxed before she even realized she had been holding her breath. "That's impossible," she whispered. Ethan laughed softly. "Nothing impossible. Just needed somebody to notice the little things." She reached into her handbag and pulled out several crisp $100 bills. Ethan immediately shook his head. "I appreciate it," he said gently, "but you don't owe me anything." Naomi frowned in disbelief. "You stopped in the middle of your day." Ethan glanced at the small pink backpack resting on the passenger seat of his truck. "My daughter gets out of summer art camp in about 20 minutes. I'd want someone to stop if she ever needed help someday." Naomi slowly lowered the money. For the first time in a very long time, someone had looked at her without wondering what she owned, what she earned, or what she could offer in return. Neither of them noticed the black sedan parked quietly across the road. Inside, a photographer lowered his camera after capturing a single image. One struggling single father smiling beside a grateful woman whose face the entire business world would recognize before sunrise. Naomi thanked Ethan one last time before easing the Mustang back onto the highway. But instead of feeling relieved, she found herself replaying every word he had spoken. The engine purred smoothly beneath her hands, yet her thoughts remained with the quiet mechanic who had refused money as naturally as most people accepted it. She arrived at the downtown restaurant nearly 15 minutes late. The valet greeted her with practiced enthusiasm while polished glass doors reflected the skyline of Nashville behind her. Inside, the elegant dining room buzzed with expensive conversations, crystal glasses, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Her blind date, a successful investment executive named Richard Collins, stood as she approached the table. He complimented her dress before asking about quarterly markets, luxury travel, and mutual business acquaintances within the first 5 minutes. Naomi answered politely, but every sentence felt heavier than the last. She realized she had spent years surrounded by people who knew exactly how to impress a boardroom and almost nothing about comforting another human being stranded beside a lonely road. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan parked his old truck outside the Franklin Community Arts Center just as children poured through the front entrance carrying paintings, clay sculptures, and oversized backpacks. 8-year-old Lily Walker spotted him immediately. Her bright smile erased every trace of exhaustion from his face as she ran into his arms holding a watercolor painting of a small farmhouse beneath a golden sunset. "Daddy, I won the kindness ribbon today," she said proudly. Ethan looked at the blue ribbon taped carefully to the corner of her artwork. "What did you do to earn that?" Lily shrugged as though it were the simplest thing in the world. "A new girl forgot her lunch, so I shared mine." Ethan smiled warmly. "Sounds like somebody made your mother proud." Lily slipped her hand into his as they walked toward the truck. "Did anything interesting happen at work?" she asked. Ethan chuckled softly. "I helped someone get back on the road." Lily looked up with wide eyes. "Did you fix it?" "Just a loose connection." "Did they say thank you?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, that was enough." At the restaurant, Richard continued describing vacation homes along the California coast while checking messages on his phone every few minutes. Naomi barely noticed the expensive meal placed before her. Her mind drifted back to the roadside, where silence had somehow felt more meaningful than this polished conversation. When Richard casually suggested that successful people naturally belong together because they understood each other, Naomi quietly folded her napkin onto the table. "I think success can mean many different things," she said gently. He laughed, assuming she was joking. She did not laugh with him. Less than 10 minutes later, she thanked him for his time, wished him well, and walked out into the warm evening air. The city lights shimmered against the Cumberland River while a gentle breeze carried the scent of magnolia through the streets. She opened the notes application on her phone and typed only 2 words before staring at the screen for several long seconds. Walker Auto. She did not know why she was saving the name of a small neighborhood garage. She only knew that somewhere between a broken fuel line and an honest smile, something inside her carefully organized world had shifted in a way no business meeting, award ceremony, or carefully arranged dinner ever had. And miles away, Ethan tucked Lily into bed without the slightest idea that the woman whose car he had repaired had quietly decided she was not finished crossing paths with him. The next morning arrived wrapped in golden sunlight and the familiar scent of fresh coffee drifting through Walker Auto Repair as Ethan unlocked the garage doors before 7 o'clock. The quiet hum of ceiling fans mixed with the distant sound of passing trucks while dust floated through narrow beams of light cutting across the concrete floor. Ethan always arrived early. It gave him a few peaceful moments before customers, invoices, and repair orders filled the day. He placed Lily's latest painting on the small shelf above his workbench, smiling as he noticed the blue kindness ribbon still attached to the corner. It reminded him that some things mattered far more than profit. Across town, Naomi sat through a leadership meeting inside the glass headquarters of Brooks Mobility Group, listening as executives discussed expansion plans, market forecasts, and shareholder expectations. Charts filled enormous screens. Voices debated numbers worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet her attention drifted toward a completely different image, a weathered garage with open doors, an old pickup truck, and a mechanic who had quietly walked away from several $100s without hesitation. When the meeting finally ended, she surprised herself by canceling the rest of her afternoon appointments. Her assistant blinked in confusion. Naomi rarely canceled anything. Less than 40 minutes later, the familiar blue Mustang rolled slowly into the parking lot outside Walker Auto Repair. Ethan looked up from replacing brake pads on a family minivan and immediately recognized both the car and the woman stepping out with a warm smile. Naomi carried a small white bakery box tied with a blue ribbon. "I hope I am not interrupting your day," she said. Ethan wiped his hands on a clean shop towel and smiled. "Only if those are vegetables." Naomi laughed for the first time in days. "They are cinnamon rolls from my favorite bakery." Ethan accepted the box with genuine appreciation. "Well, now you have definitely improved everyone's afternoon." Before either of them could say another word, the front office door burst open and Lily came running inside after finishing a half-day summer art workshop nearby with a family friend who had dropped her off. She spotted Naomi beside the Mustang and slowed politely. "Hi," Lily said with a shy smile. Naomi crouched slightly, so they stood almost eye to eye. "Hi there. You must be the daughter your dad was talking about." Lily nodded proudly. "I am Lily." Naomi extended her hand with playful seriousness. "Naomi." Lily shook it with both hands before noticing the classic Mustang behind her. "That is the prettiest car I have ever seen." Naomi smiled. "Thank you. It almost left me stranded until your dad rescued it." Lily looked at Ethan with complete confidence. "He fixes everything. Even my bicycle." Ethan laughed softly. "Not everything." Naomi noticed the quiet humility in those two simple words. While Ethan returned to finishing the minivan, Lily offered to show Naomi the tiny flower garden they had planted beside the garage office. The little girl explained how each flower had been chosen because her mother used to love bright colors in the summertime. Naomi listened carefully, saying very little, allowing Lily's cheerful stories to fill the silence naturally. Watching them from across the shop, Ethan felt something unusual settle over the afternoon. Naomi did not speak to Lily like an important executive entertaining a child. She listened like someone who genuinely valued every sentence. As Naomi prepared to leave, she glanced back toward Ethan. "Thank you again," she said. Ethan nodded. "Drive safely." She started the Mustang but remained parked for another moment, realizing she had come to return a kindness and was leaving with something she had not expected at all. For the second time in less than 24 hours, she drove away smiling, while Ethan simply returned to his work, never imagining that somewhere inside Brooks' mobility group, an anonymous photograph from the roadside had already begun quietly making its way from one inbox to another. Summer settled gently over Franklin during the following week, wrapping the small town in warm evenings, humming cicadas, and skies painted with long streaks of gold that lingered well past sunset. Walker Auto Repair followed its familiar rhythm each day as neighbors dropped off pickup trucks, family sedans, and aging work vans that had faithfully served generations. Ethan greeted every customer with the same quiet smile, never rushing anyone, never treating an expensive vehicle differently from an old one that had clearly seen better days. Late Wednesday afternoon, the unmistakable sound of a classic V8 engine rolled into the parking lot once again. Ethan glanced up from beneath the hood of a Chevrolet Silverado and smiled when he recognized the midnight blue Mustang. Naomi stepped out wearing simple jeans, white sneakers, and a light denim jacket that looked nothing like the polished executive attire hidden inside her office closet. She carried no designer handbag this time, only a reusable coffee cup and an easy smile. "I think my engine sounds perfect," she admitted with a playful grin. "Then what brings you here?" Ethan asked. Naomi looked around the garage before answering. "Honestly, I was driving nearby and thought I would see if your expert opinion still agreed." Ethan laughed quietly. "Well, since you are already here, let us have a listen." A few minutes later, he confirmed that everything was running smoothly. Naomi thanked him, but instead of leaving immediately, she accepted a folding chair beside the garage while Ethan finished replacing an alternator. Neither of them seemed uncomfortable with the silence. The air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass from a nearby field, while an old country song drifted softly from a dusty radio sitting on a shelf above the workbench. "Do you always enjoy working on cars this much?" Naomi finally asked. Ethan tightened one final bolt before looking up. "Cars make sense. They tell you what is wrong if you are willing to pay attention. People are usually much quieter." Naomi smiled thoughtfully. Maybe that is why they need someone willing to listen. Their conversation drifted naturally from classic automobiles to favorite small-town diners, childhood memories, and the beauty of slow Sunday mornings. Naomi carefully avoided mentioning board meetings, private flights, or corporate acquisitions. Ethan never asked what she did for a living. To him, she was simply Naomi, the woman whose Mustang had broken down on a hot summer afternoon. Later that evening, Lily arrived carrying another painting still dotted with drying watercolor. She beamed the moment she spotted Naomi sitting beneath the shade of the old maple tree beside the garage. "You came back." Naomi smiled warmly. "I guess I did." Lily proudly held up her newest artwork. It showed 3 people standing beside a blue car under a bright summer sky. Ethan chuckled. "That was fast." Lily shrugged. "I paint people I like." Naomi accepted the picture with genuine gratitude, studying every colorful brushstroke as though it belonged in a museum instead of a child's sketchbook. Her eyes lingered on the three smiling figures standing together beneath a sky filled with oversized yellow stars. She could not remember the last time anyone had included her in something so simple and so sincere. As the evening breeze cooled the air, Naomi reluctantly stood beside her Mustang. I should probably get going. Ethan nodded. Safe drive home. She paused before opening the car door. Would it be all right if I stopped by again sometime? Ethan answered with the same calm honesty that had first caught her attention. You do not need a reason. Naomi smiled quietly before driving away beneath the fading orange sky, unaware that across town an impatient group of board members had already begun asking why their chief executive had become strangely unavailable every afternoon, while Ethan returned to closing the garage, never realizing that the peaceful conversations he now looked forward to each day were gently changing two lives at the same time. Monday morning arrived with unusually heavy clouds hanging above downtown Nashville, and the mood inside Brooks Mobility Group felt just as gray. Naomi stepped into the executive conference room, carrying nothing more than a notebook and a cup of black coffee, but every conversation seemed to stop for half a second before quietly starting again. Faces that usually greeted her with confidence now exchanged cautious glances. A large screen at the front of the room displayed the agenda for the quarterly strategy session, yet no one seemed interested in discussing revenue forecasts. Instead, the chairman folded his hands and slid a printed photograph across the polished conference table. Naomi looked down without changing her expression. It was the picture taken beside the highway only days earlier. Ethan stood beside the Mustang with grease on his hands and an easy smile while she faced him with unmistakable gratitude. The image looked completely innocent, yet everyone in the room seemed determined to assign it a different meaning. Care to explain? The chairman asked calmly. Naomi looked around the table before answering. A mechanic helped repair my car. One executive leaned forward. The media does not see a mechanic. They see the chief executive officer spending time with an unknown man. Another added, investors notice patterns. Perception matters. Naomi remained composed. Character matters more. The room grew noticeably quieter. A younger board member cleared his throat. We also heard you left the charity dinner early last Thursday. That is correct, Naomi replied. And you canceled 2 networking events this week. Yes. May we ask why? Naomi answered without hesitation. Because not every meaningful conversation happens inside a ballroom. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, the chairman sighed. There is another concern. He opened a folder containing plans for a highly publicized partnership dinner that would introduce Naomi to the son of a respected business family whose investment firm was preparing a multi-billion-dollar collaboration with Brooks Mobility Group. The event has already been announced to several important guests. Naomi looked at the invitation before gently sliding it back across the table. Then they should know I will not be attending. A wave of disbelief swept through the room. The chairman removed his glasses slowly. Naomi, this partnership affects thousands of employees. She nodded. Then let us build it on honest business decisions, not on the appearance of a perfect personal life. Across town, Ethan knew nothing about the conversations unfolding inside the corporate headquarters. He spent the afternoon helping an elderly couple prepare their station wagon for a cross-country trip before sitting outside the garage with Lily, sharing sandwiches beneath the shade of the maple tree. Lily pointed toward the road. Do you think Naomi will visit today? Ethan smiled gently. She has her own life to live. Lily looked thoughtful. She seems happier here. Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched the quiet highway stretching toward the horizon. Some places remind people who they are, he finally said. As evening settled across Franklin, Naomi sat alone in her office overlooking the city skyline. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from directors, investors, and public relations advisors urging her to reconsider. She silenced every notification before opening the small drawer of her desk. Inside rested the watercolor painting Lily had given her, carefully protected inside a clear folder. Naomi smiled softly as she traced the painted blue Mustang beneath the bright yellow stars. Outside her office window, the lights of one of the most successful companies in America sparkled across the skyline. Yet for the first time in years, the place that felt most like home was not inside the building she owned. It was a quiet garage where no one cared about her title, and somewhere beyond the city lights. That simple truth was beginning to change everything. 3 days passed without the familiar sound of the midnight blue Mustang pulling into Walker Auto Repair, and although Ethan never mentioned it, Lily noticed the difference almost immediately. Every afternoon she glanced toward the entrance whenever a car slowed near the garage, only to return quietly to her coloring books when another customer drove in instead. Ethan kept himself busy replacing transmissions, changing oil, and helping neighbors prepare their vehicles for weekend trips, but there were brief moments when his eyes drifted toward the highway before returning to the work in front of him. Across Nashville, Naomi found herself surrounded by schedules that no longer felt like her own. Public relations advisors arranged interviews. Attorneys reviewed partnership agreements. Investors requested private dinners. Every hour seemed planned by someone else. Yet, each evening, after the office lights dimmed and the elevators grew quiet, she found herself staring at Lily's watercolor painting resting against the corner of her desk. It reminded her that somewhere beyond the skyscrapers existed a place where conversations were never measured by influence or opportunity. Late Friday afternoon, heavy summer clouds rolled across Middle Tennessee, and a gentle rain began falling over Franklin. Ethan was closing one of the garage doors when headlights appeared through the curtain of rain. The Mustang eased into the parking lot, water glistening across its polished hood. Naomi stepped out carrying no umbrella, laughing softly as the rain dampened her hair before Ethan hurried over with an old blue shop umbrella. "You are going to get soaked," he said. Naomi smiled. "I already did." Lily burst through the office door the moment she recognized the car. "You came back." Naomi knelt and wrapped the little girl in a warm hug. "I missed you too." Ethan watched quietly, surprised by how naturally the moment unfolded. Inside the garage, rain tapped gently against the metal roof while the smell of fresh coffee filled the small office. Naomi accepted a warm mug and looked around at the familiar shelves filled with tools, family photographs, and handwritten thank you notes from longtime customers. "I think this might be the most peaceful place in Tennessee," she said. Ethan smiled. "It is not fancy. That is exactly why I like it." For a while they simply listened to the rain. There was no pressure to impress each other, no awkward silence waiting to be filled. Finally Naomi spoke, her voice softer than usual. "Do you ever feel like everyone expects you to keep playing a role you stopped believing in a long time ago?" Ethan thought carefully before answering. "After my wife passed away, people expected me to become someone different, stronger, busier, less emotional. But Lily needed a father, not a performance." Naomi lowered her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone actually knows me." Ethan looked at her with the same calm honesty she had come to trust. The right people usually learn who you are one quiet conversation at a time. Their eyes met for a long moment before Lily skipped back into the room, holding a small paper cup filled with wildflowers she had gathered near the fence. "These are for both of you," she announced proudly. Naomi accepted the tiny bouquet with visible emotion. Without thinking, she reached over and gently embraced Ethan in a brief, grateful hug. It lasted only a few seconds, simple and sincere, yet it carried more warmth than any carefully arranged gala or formal handshake she had experienced in years. Neither of them noticed the dark SUV parked across the street. Behind its tinted window, the same photographer quietly lifted his camera once again. As the shutter clicked, another image was captured, one that would soon spread far beyond a rainy little garage where two lonely hearts still believed they had all the time in the world. By the beginning of the following week, the quiet rhythm that had brought Naomi so much peace was interrupted by headlines she had never asked for. A business blog published the photographs taken outside Walker Auto Repair beneath the caption, "Who is the mystery man spending time with Brooks Mobility Group's chief executive officer?" Within hours, the story spread across financial websites and social media. Commentators invented rumors. Television hosts speculated about secret relationships and hidden business deals. None of them knew the truth. They only saw a successful executive and a small-town mechanic. They never saw the kindness that had started it all. Naomi arrived at headquarters to find reporters waiting outside the building. Camera flashes reflected against the glass entrance while her security team quietly guided her inside. The board of directors had already called an emergency meeting. Faces around the conference table looked tense. The chairman folded his hands and spoke with careful restraint. The story is affecting investor confidence. We need this distraction to end. Naomi remained calm. There is nothing improper to end. Another executive leaned forward. Then stop visiting the garage until this attention disappears. Silence settled across the room. Naomi looked through the conference room windows toward the city below before answering. You are asking me to avoid the one place where nobody has ever wanted anything from me. No one replied. Across town, Ethan knew nothing about the meeting until one of his regular customers walked into the garage carrying a newspaper folded beneath his arm. The customer hesitated before placing it on the counter. Ethan glanced down and immediately recognized the photograph of himself standing beside Naomi beneath the rain-soaked umbrella. A second image showed their brief embrace outside the garage. The headline described him only as an unidentified mechanic linked to a powerful business leader. Ethan quietly folded the newspaper without reading another word. He thanked the customer, finished repairing the family sedan, and waited until the garage became quiet before searching Naomi's name on his old office computer. Within seconds, dozens of articles appeared across the screen. Chief Executive Officer, Brooks Mobility Group, National Business Awards, magazine covers, billion-dollar expansion plans. Ethan leaned back slowly. Suddenly, every canceled appointment, every mysterious phone call, every careful answer she had given made perfect sense. He closed the browser without opening another article. Lily walked into the office carrying 2 lemonades she had made herself. Daddy, are you okay? Ethan forced a gentle smile. I am just thinking. She looked at the folded newspaper. Is that Naomi? He nodded softly. Lily smiled with complete innocence. She is still the same person. Ethan looked at his daughter for a long moment before quietly answering. Yes, sweetheart. She is. But after Lily returned outside, he stood alone beside the garage window watching the afternoon traffic drift past. He understood something that had never crossed his mind before. Naomi lived in a world watched by cameras, investors, and expectations far beyond anything he could imagine. His quiet life had become part of her public story without either of them intending it. As the sun slowly settled beyond the trees, Ethan picked up his phone more than once before setting it back down without making a call. If Naomi needed peace, he would not become another burden she had to carry. Sometimes the greatest act of kindness was knowing when to step back. And miles away, Naomi stared at the unanswered message she had written to Ethan 3 different times before deleting every word, never realizing that at that very moment both of them were making the same heartbreaking decision in silence. The distance between Nashville and Franklin had never felt very far until silence settled between 2 people who both believed they were protecting the other. Nearly 2 weeks passed without a single visit, a single phone call, or a single message. Walker Auto Repair returned to its familiar routine, yet something invisible had changed. Ethan still greeted every customer with the same patience and quiet smile, but when the blue Mustang failed to appear day after day, even the old maple tree outside the garage seemed strangely lonely. Lily noticed it too. One evening, while helping her father close the garage doors, she looked up and asked, "Do you think Naomi forgot about us?" Ethan knelt beside his daughter and gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes good people become very busy." Lily thought quietly before answering. Busy is different from forgetting. Ethan smiled sadly because children often understood truths that adults complicated. At Brooks Mobility Group, Naomi faced the largest annual shareholder conference in the company's history. Executives filled every hour with rehearsals, interviews, and strategic meetings. Advisors encouraged her to smile more, reveal less, and avoid every personal question that reporters might ask. Yet each evening, she found herself opening the same desk drawer and looking at Lily's watercolor painting before leaving the office. It reminded her of a place where nobody had ever asked about quarterly earnings or public image. On the morning of the conference, the convention center buzzed with thousands of guests, investors, journalists, and industry leaders. Bright lights reflected across enormous presentation screens while television crews prepared for the keynote address. Moments before Naomi stepped onto the stage, her chief operations officer hurried backstage with visible concern. "We have a problem," he whispered. "The prototype for tomorrow's nationwide unveiling will not start. Every engineer has already tried. Naomi followed him into the exhibition hall where the company's newest electric concept vehicle stood, surrounded by anxious technicians. Laptops remained connected. Diagnostic equipment flashed across multiple screens. Suggestions filled the room, but solutions did not. One engineer quietly admitted, "The software says everything is normal, but something mechanical is preventing the system from completing its startup sequence." Naomi stared at the silent vehicle for several long seconds before an unexpected memory returned. She remembered a quiet mechanic standing beside a broken Mustang, saying that machines always tell the truth if someone is willing to listen. She slowly reached into her pocket, unlocked her phone, and opened Ethan's contact information. Her thumb hovered above his name, while everyone around her continued offering complicated technical theories. Finally, she pressed the call button. Miles away, Ethan was replacing the water pump on an old family station wagon when his phone vibrated across the workbench. He glanced at the screen and froze. Naomi's name appeared for the first time since the newspaper headlines. He answered calmly, "Hello." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Naomi's voice, gentle and uncertain, finally broke the silence. "I know I probably have no right to ask this after disappearing, but I need someone I trust. Would you be willing to help me?" Ethan looked toward Lily, who was drawing flowers with sidewalk chalk outside the garage. He smiled softly before answering the question with the same simple kindness that had changed everything on a quiet highway weeks before. "Tell me where you are. I am on my way." Less than an hour later, Ethan's old Ford pickup rolled quietly beneath the towering glass entrance of the Nashville Convention Center, looking almost invisible beside rows of luxury vehicles and television broadcast trucks. Security personnel exchanged uncertain glances until Naomi herself walked through the front doors to meet him. For a brief second, the noise of the crowd seemed to disappear. She smiled with unmistakable relief. "Thank you for coming." Ethan answered exactly as he had weeks before beside the broken Mustang. "Just tell me where to look." Inside the exhibition hall, dozens of engineers stepped aside as Ethan slowly circled the silent prototype. He never hurried. He never tried to impress anyone. Instead, he rested one hand lightly against the body panel, listened as technicians explained the symptoms, and quietly asked them to restart the sequence one more time. The vehicle responded with the same incomplete cycle before shutting itself down. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, crouched near a rear access panel, and noticed something everyone else had overlooked. A tiny connector had not fully locked into place after a late software update. It was a simple mechanical interruption hiding inside an extraordinarily sophisticated machine. He secured the connection with careful hands before stepping back. "Try it now." The lead engineer pressed the start button once again. A gentle electronic tone echoed through the hall, followed by the smooth awakening of the entire system. Giant display screens illuminated. The prototype came to life exactly as designed. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then applause spread across the exhibition floor, beginning with one technician, then another, until the entire hall filled with grateful smiles instead of anxious whispers. Ethan quietly wiped his hands with the same shop towel he always carried and prepared to leave without waiting for recognition. "Mr. Walker," Naomi called softly from the stage. He turned. "Would you stay for one more minute?" Thousands of guests settled into silence as Naomi stepped behind the podium for her keynote address. She looked across the audience of investors, reporters, employees, and community leaders before speaking in a calm, steady voice. "Today, many people will talk about innovation, leadership, and success. I would rather tell you about kindness." Every camera in the room turned toward her. "Several weeks ago, my car broke down on a quiet highway. One man stopped to help me. He did not know my name. He did not know my position. He refused my money because he believed helping another person was simply the right thing to do. That man is standing here today." She extended her hand toward Ethan. "The greatest lesson I have learned this year did not come from a boardroom. It came from a father who taught his daughter that character is measured by how we treat people who can offer us nothing in return." The room became completely still before rising together in a long standing ovation. Ethan looked almost uncomfortable with the attention, but Naomi walked toward him, gently took his hand, and smiled through grateful eyes. "Thank you for reminding me who I wanted to become long before I ever became a chief executive officer." Months later, Walker Auto Repair looked much the same as it always had. The tools remained well worn. The maple tree still shaded the front entrance. The difference was found in the laughter that now filled the little garage, almost. Every evening, Naomi visited often, never because a car needed repair, but because her heart had finally found a place where titles no longer mattered. Lily no longer hesitated when she ran into Naomi's arms after school, and one golden autumn afternoon she looked up with the innocent certainty only a child possesses and quietly said, "Welcome home." Naomi embraced both Lily and Ethan as the fading sunlight warmed the old garage doors, and Ethan gently kissed her forehead while she smiled with peaceful tears. In the end, the most valuable thing either of them discovered was never hidden inside a company, a classic automobile, or a successful career. It was the quiet dignity of ordinary kindness, because sometimes the person who changes your entire future is simply the one who stops on the side of the road when everyone else keeps driving.